What do you do?
I saved her.
So, today we're here to talk about my yeehaw man, Joel Miller. I want to make this a several part series where I analyze the main characters of the Last of Us series. So I want to do one, obviously, on Joel, because we're all here today. One on Ellie and one on Abby. Maybe, possibly one on Tommy. I'm not fully decided yet, so if people are interested, I'll do it. But today, I just want to talk about Joel and Joel's character development through both The Last of Us 1 and The Last of Us 2, even though he's only in a little bit of it, kind of technically. It's fine. We're going to talk about everything, flashbacks, all that good yeehaw. I keep saying yeehaw. He's from Texas, so I keep saying yeehaw, and he's not a yeehaw man. So before I get into this, obviously, spoiler alert, please don't watch this. As with anything that I do on this channel, please do not watch this if you want to play the games. There's going to be a lot of spoilers in here, and I can't help but talk about them because they're important. That's all I'm going to say. Just don't watch it if you haven't played the games yet. So let's start at the beginning of the beginning. The Last of Us 1 and its heart-wrenching opening scene. I've never been so emotionally affected by a game in such quick time. Like, every time, even to this day, I've played The Last of Us a lot of times, and I've also watched a lot of playthroughs of people playing The Last of Us for their reactions, mostly to the first scene. The emotional impact of that scene, like, wow, I cry still to this day every time I watch the scene with Sarah in the very beginning of the game. But this is a really obviously pivotal scene to why Joel is the way he is throughout the first game. He loses his daughter in a very awful way. Like, it's not even like he's losing his daughter to the infection or to something else. He loses his daughter because a military man decides to shoot her for no good reason. You know, and the only way that Joel can cope with this is to, like, shut off his emotions. When some people go through traumatic situations, they shut down because that's the only way sometimes for people to deal with that trauma immediately. Joel does not want to go through the emotions of feeling the loss of his daughter, and the only way for him to not do that, especially given the world that he's in, like the transformation into this chaotic zombie-filled apocalypse on top of the trauma of losing his daughter, is for him to just shut himself off, no emotion, nothing. He don't feel a thing. So when we see him 20 years later and he's like this, the only person close to him is Tess, right? But Tess is the same. Tess is, excuse my language, badass bitch, gets shit done. She has a very hard-headed, closed off personality. Like, even though her and Joel are close, you don't get the feeling that they are emotionally close. Like, they're the kind of people who don't talk about their emotions. They just go out and do things, and they work together to survive, and they're very close to each other because of that, but they probably don't, like, they're not sitting down at a table and talking about their trauma, you know? They're functional characters in that they need each other to survive in this world, at least for this point in time, and it's a beneficial relationship for both of them. But arguably, Tess is the closest person to Joel at the beginning of the game, other than Tommy, but Tommy's like run off to little who knows where. So when Joel meets Ellie for him is something he doesn't want to deal with. It's his fear, right? Because if he gets close to Ellie is around the same age his daughter was. She has, as he's kind of hinted at in the game, like a similar personality, or at least a personality that would have complemented Sarah's personality. They would have gotten along. So he has this fear of Ellie. For him, Ellie reminds him of this trauma that he doesn't want to talk about, that he's been closed off for a really long time. Doesn't want anything to do with Ellie because of that, right? Because they're so similar. He's like, nah, I don't want to be babysitting. Nah, I don't want to deal with this girl. This is a job. That's all I'm doing. That's his mentality. Even from the beginning of his relationship with Ellie, knows this fear. Like, he knows, he's aware that she reminds him of Sarah, and that's why he's so scared of getting close to her, being open and vulnerable with her. Like, you have the scene where he's still with Tess and they're crossing the bridge, and you see the building off in the distance with the fireflies, and he's having a conversation with Ellie, and he crosses his arms and he looks down at the watch that Sarah gave him in the very beginning, because this is the first moment we see, oh, he's being reminded of Sarah. He's thinking of Sarah right now. And this is a dangerous feeling for Joel. He doesn't want that attachment. He doesn't want that feeling. And like, losing someone is terrifying for Joel. He's not like the kind of person who wants to deal with loss. Like, the easiest way to deal with loss is just to not acknowledge that it's happening. So when Tess dies and Ellie tries to apologize and talk to him about it, he shuts that conversation down real quick because he doesn't want to feel anything. If he starts to feel something for Tess's loss, he's going to eventually feel something for Ellie. It's like a building block of trauma, and he doesn't want that to happen. He doesn't want to feel anything. He doesn't want to be encumbered by those emotions, so the only way for him to deal with it is just to shut it down. And like, obviously, as this is unavoidable, as Ellie and Joel begin to travel together, Joel subconsciously, without even realizing it, becomes protective of Ellie. He wants to take care of Ellie. He cares about her. He disguises it by saying that it's for a cause, for the cause of like bringing her to the Firefly so he can find the cure. But like, we all know that Joel doesn't actually really give a shit about that. Like, it's not about that at all. It's about the responsibility he feels, one, towards Tess in the beginning because he promises he's going to finish what she started, but two, also that as they travel, he becomes more attached to Ellie and feels a responsibility not only to her, but also to Tess. So it's like the mix of the two. It's not actually because he gives a shit about a cure. I don't think he's a cynicist? He's a realist? He bitter. And he doesn't believe that there probably could be a cure. He's like not that kind of person. Because Joel feels himself bonding with Ellie, this scares him. And when he arrives at Jackson and finds Tommy, we come to understand he doesn't want anything to do with Ellie because she's opening up this trauma that he's had and these feelings that he's had locked away for so long and never dealt with. And he still doesn't want to deal with them. And getting closer to Ellie, bringing her to the Firefly, spending more time with her, he sees that this is opening up this problem for him and he doesn't want to deal with it. He's like, oh no, panic time, feelings. So he tries to pawn Ellie off on Tommy, as we all know. Tommy, the angel that he is like, yeah, okay, I'll take her. But it's this whole path of their relationship is really building up to the scene in the house where Ellie runs away from Joel. And they finally have a confrontation where Ellie talks about Sarah. And this is like a big no-no for Joel, obviously, because Joel, up until this point, obviously has not dealt with any of those issues, has just like lived this like hard, miserable life in this new world and refused to be open to, you know, he's a hardened warrior. He doesn't want to have feelings because that weakens him and he doesn't want to deal with it. So he just does a bunch of awful stuff to not deal with it. But this scene in the farmhouse is like the culmination of his trying to avoid it and not being able to. And so when Ellie brings up Sarah, he reacts by lashing out at her. You know, he says, I'm not your dad, you're not my daughter. That's it. And he sees Ellie's reaction to it. Ellie's like all upset. She gets back onto the horse real quiet. She's like really sad. I think it's in this moment when he vocalizes these feelings, it's the first time he's had to vocalize those feelings, and in vocalizing them realizes that they're wrong and that he does care about Ellie, he does want to help Ellie, and these aren't feelings that he can just continue to push off for forever because now it's affecting someone else. Now he's seeing how they're affecting Ellie, and because Ellie reminds him of Sarah, he doesn't want to put Ellie through the things that he's putting her through. So he ultimately makes the decision to continue on the journey with Ellie. As they travel to Utah, we see that he becomes more open with his feelings. He's still a little bit closed off, but he's talking about football. They have like conversations that are like, he talks about his interest in playing guitar. He talks about all these things that are important to him that he hasn't talked about before. Like, he's opening up to Ellie and beginning to fill that like father role for her. And right, being able to come to terms with the loss of Sarah, or at least start to come to terms with the loss of Sarah, it makes the idea of losing Ellie terrifying to him. By the time they reach Salt Lake City, Joel and Ellie's relationship has fundamentally changed. Joel talks about playing guitar. He talks about singing with her. He talks about all these. He's very open. He's very much a vulnerable figure. She gives him the picture of Sarah and he takes it. This is the first time where he's not being awful to Ellie over Sarah. He's accepting the loss and allowing himself to have a relationship with Ellie, right? And that's why the ending is the way it is. When he realizes that the only way for there to be a cure is for Ellie to die, and he wakes up in the Firefly Hospital, for him there's only one option. He's not contemplating the cure. Like I said before, he doesn't give a shit about the cure. Joel's not a hero. He's not the kind of person who would give a shit about saving the world, especially at the cost of losing someone who is very important to him now. And when he makes his choice in the hospital, for him, it's the only logical solution. It's the only way for him to save Ellie, to give her the life that he thinks she deserves. It's the only way for him to do what he thinks he should do as a father. Even though he knows she won't agree with his decision, he does it to protect her. He does it so she will have a long life. He does it so that she will be happy. He doesn't want her to sacrifice her life for a cure that they're not even sure that they can develop, really. So Joel's whole transformation in the first game is about the way love transforms us as people, the way we can't avoid responsibilities. We can't avoid the people in our life that we love. We can't we can't go around feeling nothing for our whole entire lives, because what's the point of living? The whole point is that Joel is getting over the trauma of losing his daughter and finding that love again in Ellie. So then by the end of the first game, he's reverting back to maybe not the same, because obviously it's been 20 years. He's done a lot of fucked up shit and he's probably changed a lot as a person, but he's at least starting to revert back to the old Joel, like an actual human being who has feelings and emotions and empathizes with people, isn't just like a killing machine, even though he is a killing machine. He finally has a family and what he wanted from life, what was stolen from him at the beginning. He finally has that in Ellie, and for him it's a second chance. It's his redemption as a character. I found love in this other person and I can finally redeem all the terrible things that I've done. It won't wash them away, but at least I can start to use Ellie as a means for redemption as a person. Okay, and then the second game, because we're gonna get into it. The second game is a way for us to see the consequences of his decision at the end of the first game and what that does to his relationship with Ellie. The thing about the second game is obviously Joel is not in a crazy amount of the second game. He's only in he's not even in the first 2 hours, because he's really only in 2 scenes in those 2 hours. He's in maybe 30 minutes actively in the story in the beginning, and then we see him through flashbacks that Ellie has. And in the second game, we see the fallout of his decision, not only in the fact that he's hunted down and killed by Abby for killing her dad, but that we see the fallout of Ellie and Joel's relationship because he lied to her, and when she finds out the truth, it's devastating for her. She has survivor's guilt. She feels bad. She wanted her life to have purpose. She felt like dying in the hospital, being the cure, would have given her life purpose, but now she's just aimlessly running around, and she can't forgive Joel for that. We see that fallout, and the whole reason and drive, I talked about this in my last video, but the whole reason and drive of the narrative for Ellie is that she never had the chance to forgive him, but we do see that Joel never wavers in his decision. In that last scene in The Last of Us 2, when we find out why Ellie is so upset the entire time, we see Joel's love for her, regardless of how she feels and regardless of how she reacts. When they're talking about it, Joel says to her point blank, if I was given a second chance to do it, I would do it all over again. He knows that it's made Ellie mad, but he doesn't care, because for him, he's doing something for her. Even if she doesn't want it from him, what he's doing is for her, so that she can live a happy, long life. To be fair, Joel, you live in an apocalypse. How happy can her life really be? I don't know. But, you know, he does it out of love, which is the most important thing. It's not out of selfish, well, it is kind of selfish, obviously, because he just stole the cure from humanity. But in his head, he's doing it for Ellie. He's doing it so that she can live her life. So it's fatherly love for him. I think the thing that gets convoluted a lot about Joel's character is that a lot of people use the reasoning that in the second game, when he helps Abby up and then rides the horse back to the lodge where he is killed by Abby and her friends, a lot of people say, this is out of character, man. Joel would never act like that. Joel would never do this. Joel doesn't trust people. And it's frustrating because it's like, you don't even, did you play the first game? Did you see the ending of the first game? Did you pay attention to the beginning of the second game? The whole point is that he has transformed as a character. He feels empathy now. He's more in touch with himself as a person. He's with his brother. He lives with his brother and his, like, adopted daughter. He cares more about people as a whole. You know, you see that after he dies, everyone puts flowers around his porch. He was clearly beloved by his community. In the second game, they talk about how if you read the logs in the tower when Ellie and Dina are on patrol, you can see that it's part of Jackson's custom, at least when they're on patrols, that they pick up stragglers, bring them into the city, feed them, let them become part of their community, because they're not hunters and murderers and awful people. And, you know, you see that in the scene in the lodge. Obviously, Joel is going to at least semi-trust Abby because she gave them an opportunity to survive by telling them to come back to the lodge. Obviously, he did not know she was gonna kill him. But from that perspective, like, hey, I've just saved this girl's life. She's just saved my life. Like, she seems okay. And the thing is that even in that scene where he walks into the lodge, it's Tommy that introduces himself. It's Tommy that makes himself comfortable. Joel is still clearly very uncomfortable. He walks into the middle of the room. He looks around. He seems to be on guard. He's not just trusting them for no reason. But what other option does he have? He's in the room. There's a horde of zombies outside. This girl just saved him. So, like, he doesn't think, oh, she's gonna beat me to death with a golf club. Like, that's not logical and not the first thing that you would think, right? Joel's character is one of my favorite tropes in literature. I love a good old gruff man, out of touch with his feelings, who just connects with someone and then rediscovers his humanity. That is just such a good trope, and it's done so well in The Last of Us. At the beginning of it, Joel is this tough, evil dude. Like, we know from his interactions with Tess that he's a bad guy, and then that's further doubled by the conversation he has with Tommy in The Last of Us 1 when he first gets to Jackson. Tommy basically says, like, you made me do a bunch of really terrible things and it traumatized me. That's why I left you behind. So we know Joel's a bad person. And you see the torture scene in the first one. Like, he learned how to torture people. In the second game, they say, like, Ellie doesn't know who these people are because there are so many people that could have possibly had a problem with Joel because he was a bad person. And I think that's the thing that people don't get about the games, is that there's a difference between a hero and a protagonist. Joel's not a hero. He's a protagonist. He's not a good person. That's the whole point. That's why it's so easy for him at the end of the first game to make that decision to save Ellie, because he doesn't care about everyone else. All he cares about is his and his own. He's not a good person, but that doesn't mean he's not a good character. That doesn't mean that people cannot love and empathize with him. I love Joel. Joel is one of my favorite characters. I sobbed like a little baby when I watched the scene the first time. I cried on my couch. And I had to turn the game off because it was just so upsetting, and I was very angry when I played the second game the first time, and over time I've come to change how I feel about it and how I feel about the characters and the plot. But Joel is a great character. Joel isn't a good guy. He did what he did for a reason, and we can understand and empathize with that, but that doesn't make him a good character. He stole from Abby what Abby stole from Ellie. So, I don't know, man. Not justified 100% to beat a man with a golf club, but, like, the way I see it, someone was probably going to do it eventually. If not Abby, it was one of the hundreds of other people that Joel killed. even in just the first game, let alone from the time before the first game happened, right? I don't know. I love Joel a lot as a character, and I think he's a really interesting character. Mayhaps not the most complex character, but sometimes those are the best characters to love. Very straightforward, know what's important to them, know what's happening, don't have to second guess anything. But you know, it's Joel's love for Ellie that is the most important and strongest thing about his character, and how as a parent he would do anything for her. And the game shows that very clearly. It's the whole point of the games, is that he becomes an amazing father figure for Ellie and literally sacrifices his life so that she can live hers, even if it doesn't work out great in the end. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe. I'm gonna make more videos. If you guys want to see anything, please let a girl know, because I'm willing to do and play anything and talk about anything, because I love talking about this kind of stuff. But yeah, please stay safe. Bye.
Close your eyes. It'll be worth it.